Welcome to lesson number 1 of our Python programming series. If you haven't already watched lesson 0 where we set up Python and PyCharm, go back and watch that one before continuing with this lesson. In today's lesson, we are looking at variables, data types, and the print command. So the first thing you need to do is go ahead and open up PyCharm. With PyCharm open, you'll see that you should have a similar layout to what we ended with in the first video, and that you'll have the test.py file somewhere at the top, and you'll have it here on the left hand side. Well, we're going to close that tab, and we're going to go to this test.py file, and we're just going to rename that something new, and the rename option is under refactor. So I'm going to hit rename, and I'm going to call this lesson 1. I'm going to go 01, there we go. And once you've named it lesson 01, double click it and it will open up that file again, and we'll have it lesson 01 at the top. So we're looking at variables first of all. And what a variable is it's simply just a container. Now we use variables in the form of a container all the time. When you go to pour yourself a drink, you grab a glass. Now that glass is empty and you pour it and you fill it with something. You then can say modify it by drinking that glass, and then you might wash it and put it back. Now what we can do in PyCharm is we can make those containers. So I'm going to push enter a couple of times, go to line 3, and I might make that a little bigger for you to see at home if I can. Let's see. There we go. And I'm going to make a new container. So I'm just going to give it a random name. I'm going to call it door. Now when I write door, first thing you're going to see is PyCharm goes, hey, looks like you've made a mistake here. It's got this red line underneath. Now one, that is because we haven't finished typing it. But 2, it's because it thinks we've put an error in, and that's because it doesn't know what that is. If we go space and then push equals, well, now we've said to PyCharm, hey, this is a variable that we're going to use. We just haven't given it a value. So this is like grabbing a glass out of the cupboard, but we haven't filled it with anything. So we need to put something in here. And this is where our data types come into play, because we have 4 main data types that we're going to look at. One is an integer. One is a string, one's what's called a float, which is just a decimal number, and the other is a boolean, and we're going to cover all of these now. So I can enter whatever I like into this variable name here. So I'm going to use an integer to start with. So if I enter 9, you'll see it is happy with that. I get this little yellow line that appears, and yellow means it's okay, we'll still run, but we don't think you've done a good job coding. So if I push backspace and enter, you'll see now it's happy, there's not an extra space at the end. So I've said door equals 9. And so I've said there's a variable, I'm naming it door, and I'm giving it a value of 9. Now I've just given it a goofy name there just so we understand, variables can be anything. If you do a lot of maths, you might have x is equal to, and we can put, another number in here if we like. We could put a number like this, 5.5. We could do another variable, let's say, I don't know, new, and we'll say this is equal to. And now if I try put text in here, so if I said new equals, and I just wrote, text, you'll see firstly, it's not happy with me. And that's because I'm trying to use a string data type. Now what a string data type is it's just wrapped text. Now what that means is it needs to have quotes on the outside to be seen as this is for text purposes only. If we don't put this on the outside, it thinks we're trying to do a command or make a new variable, and it gets upset with us. And I'll see if it gives a recommendation to fix this up. No, it doesn't. So we need to make sure when we're dealing with strings, we have quotes on the outside. It can be double quotes. It could be just single quotes as well. That works too. I typically go and use double. And what we're telling PyCharm there is we've got some text that we want to use. So you can see here we've got 3 different variables so far, door, x, and new, and 3 different values. Now I'm going to make it a bit clearer and a bit more obvious of why we have different data types and where we might use them. So let's say we were making, stay on line 3, let's say we were making a program that dealt with any new student at a school. So the first thing you might have is you might have their name. So you might have student and then name. And I'm going to make that equal to, and at this point I'm just going to say John. Okay. Now there's lots to unpack here. First thing, a good sort of practice with coding is to do this thing called camel casing. And that means instead of having 2 words like that, student name, which gives an error, we do a capital for the next word to keep that together. Now, some coders, they put an underscore like that, student underscore name. But I typically just say student name and I do camel casing so you can easily see it. Means if we had another word in there, like student name date, you can easily see the difference between each one. The other thing is you'll notice I don't use capitals at the start of my variables, and it just makes it easier later on down the track. We'll talk about that more when it's relevant. All right, so we have the student name and we've set it to this data type of string. And I'm going to go in and now do another variable. And I'm going to do it for the age of this new student. So if I write age is equal to, and we'll just say the new student is 16. Okay. So I've done a string, and I've set that as student name. And I've done an age, and I've set that as 16. I want to use a decimal point here. So we might say the student's height, and you can see it's got upset with me there. Why did it get upset with me? Because I haven't set it to anything. Student's height, we'll say John is 5'9". And then the last thing we'll do is I want to use the other data type that I talked about, which is a Boolean value. And let's just say is online equals false. All right, so let's say he's on Teams or something like that, and there's an is online status. And you can see a Boolean value can be true or false only. So it only has two values. So I'm going to leave it as false. And that's all of our data types. So they're the ones that we're going to primarily use. Now, there are other data types out there, but these are the ones that we use all the time. Now, the reason that we have to set a data type is once a data type has been set, we then can do certain things with that data. So for example, if I wanted to add one to the student age, well, I can add one to age. I can't add one to student name though, because it wouldn't make sense. Now the beauty of Python is it'll set this data type for you based upon what you've already done. So here I've set the student name to John. So it knows, okay, well, this is a string. I can sort of force it and tell it, you know, this is an integer, and I can do something like this. I can say int and go like that. And that's going to force it into thinking, well, this is definitely an integer. Same for the other ones, like I could write float and string and so on. But it actually does it by default, that we don't need to worry about that at all. So now that we have that information, we're going to try and use the print command here. So to print, and this is a sort of a core function in Python and PyCharm, we just write the word print. Now we do a bracket, and you'll see it automatically puts the other one in for us. So because I've written print, it's now going to know, all right, well, whatever's in these brackets here, we are going to output when the user pushes play. So I'm going to say student name, and then when I push play, and a good tip is to go over to lesson 1 or your tab up here, right click on that and go run there. Sometimes if you run there, it can run a previous one or something like that. So I normally right click and run that one there. And you see down here, it is printed for us John. So I printed the student name. Let's go and do a big print in here. Well, let's do a few together. We're going to print age, and let's go print his height. So if I run that now, it prints John, 16 and 5'9". I want to do a little more with it. So what I'm going to say is let's delete that, and we're going to say, we're going to do a custom print here. So we're going to say, quote, print the student name is, and then I'm going to put a comma here. I'll write student name. So what I've done is I've put a string inside my print. I've put a comma to separate the two, and then I've put the variable. And let me hit play on that first, make sure that works. The student name is John, perfect. Now I'm going to go comma, then I'll say his, let's go lowercase, his age is, comma, age, another comma, and, oops, I need a string, and his height is right, let's run that now. Run. There we go. The student name is John, his age is 16, and his height is 5'9". Perfect. So what we've done here is we've learnt these are our variables. We can assign a data type and a value to our variable by what we put on the right side here. We've got here a string, we've got here an integer, we've got here a float, and here we have a Boolean value. So we've added all of those in, and then we've written the print command where we've printed out just down here. So that's our first lesson over for Python. There's a few core concepts in this one. In our next lesson, we're going to look at how the user can input data like this, and we're going to look at how you can do a bit of maths on some of these different data types here. So I'll see you in lesson number 2.